Okay, we're back for another week of masterclasses. We are on set 10. We are over a week of PBE now. So set 10 has been out for a bit if you had a chance to try it out on the public beta environment. Because there are still a lot of changes going on, we are not going to be talking about any specific compositions in general yet because some compositions might be buffed, some might be nerfed before the live A patch. So in the meantime, we'll just talk about general tips to climb and just to find success in set 10. So we'll talk more about like how to play the units rather than like which units are like super good and like how to play certain comps rather than saying like, oh, what comps you should play right now, because who knows, maybe it'll change before it goes on to live servers. So yeah, without further ado, let's get into it. So 3 main things we'll be talking about today. If you watched my intro to set 10, I did touch upon this, but I want to touch upon it further now that we have more information. Headliners, right? The keynote traits or the keynote topic and aspect of set 10. We'll be diving deeper into this. And then the other parts is going to be itemization and positioning. We'll just do a quick rundown of like the new like set 10 items and how to play around them, so generally, and set 10 like positioning in general or just unit positioning in general. And then we'll go more in depth about like specific traits, how to itemize specific units of specific traits, and then how to position specific units and how to position against specific units. Last but not least, as usual, we'll have a Q&A at the end, and I'm happy to answer any questions then. Okay, so let's get into it. General tips to climb on Remix Rumble set 10. First off, let's talk about headliners. So headliners, we'll talk about the early game. In general, TFT, this has always been the case. Strong early game boards will always be consisting of strong frontline and backline. If you have super strong frontline but no backline, then you're just not going to have any damage. Unless you have like a frontline like bruiser, then that's fine. But generally, you want to have a general case of tank and damage. So what does this mean? Between stage 1 and 2-1, so 2-1 is the first combat round, right? You want to have a headliner that fits your board to fill out either this frontline or backline gap. So if you have a really strong frontline, then you might want to have a backline chosen. Or if you have a lot of backline damage, then look for a frontline chosen. And the most important thing is you're going to have about like 4 shops to really figure out what headliner you want, right? Like 1-2, 1-3, 1-4, and then 2-1. So you're going to have like 4 chances to find a headliner, and the trick is that to not always greed like the best, because sometimes that won't happen. So be open and be able to buy acceptable choices when they come by, and that'll be good enough to at least like help you win some rounds. And who knows, maybe after in 4 rounds, every four rounds you'll find another headliner. If you have one picked, you'll get a better option then. So basically, don't be too greedy. If something acceptable comes up, be sure to take it. Strong 1-cost headliners right now for early game are like Tom Kench, Kennen, Cassante, Lilia, Corki. These are strong and also very easy to play around. There are some other strong ones that are a bit harder and more complicated lines, but I'd say these are like pretty basic, very easy to play around. And generally, like 1-cost frontliners are just really strong. In early games, sometimes boards don't have enough damage to get through the tanky frontliners, especially if they have sustain. So these are super good. And then, as I mentioned, if you have a strong backline, then look for like a backline chosen to even it out, and then vice versa. And here are the notes given by Riot about how headliners work. So I won't go through every single one of them, but basically they come in like 2 stars, right? So they add to your traits. I'll talk about this one. So it appears once in every 4 shops when you do have a headliner. So it'll be on the 4th shop that they appear, not after 4 shops. And then just a couple other ones. They take 3 units from the pool as usual. And then the very last one is they added pretty recently, I think, is like when half of the total unit copies of a unit is gone, or at least out of the pool. So either someone's like holding them on bench or playing them, the headliner for that unit will no longer be offered. And this is to avoid the thing where they have like, where someone has like 6 copies of a unit, and then they're just re-rolling for that like headliner for like the final 3. So then they just get a free like 3-star. And this happened a lot for like 4-cost units. So this is to avoid that, where you just have like 2 stars and you're just sending it for that last 3 copies within the headliners. And yeah, so that's how you want to play your early game. Make sure you just have a strong mix of tank and damage. And then going more into the mid game and to the late game. Because of this mechanic, we know that if you don't have a headliner held, you're guaranteed to see one in every shop. It'll be in the far right slot of the shop. And because it's guaranteed to see one every shop if you don't have one held, it means that at higher levels, it's okay to at least roll a bit to find a higher tier headliner, and they'll boost the power of your board a lot. So here are the chances for the headliners. I didn't include level 6 in here because sometimes one cost headliners are fine enough to get through levels 1 to 6, and then on level 7, then you can look for a 3-cost headliner. You'll have a much higher chance, 60% chance. For example, if you have like a Heartsteel Cassante, then you don't really want to be selling that on level 6. Maybe you'll pivot out if you find a stronger thing on level 7, or even just like keep it. But generally, level 6, you don't have to roll if you're already in a good spot. You could just go for level 7. If you're super rich, well, like super rich, it's 3-2, but realistically, more generally, it's 3-5, and I wouldn't say any later than that. Very rarely do you now 4-1 it because of the lower cost to level up, and with so many economic options nowadays, you're able to get to level 7 on 3-5 pretty reasonably. So level 7, look for a 3-cost headliner, and then level 8, a 4-cost headliner, and level 9, eventually a 5-cost headliner. So don't be afraid to sell your current headliner, especially if it doesn't really fit well into your board and you're just playing it for tempo. Sell it. You're guaranteed to find another one at every shop. Find an upgrade, so a higher tier, so change it in, and then go from there. So basically, this whole thing is saying, don't just sit with like a 1-cost headliner for like the entire game to like level 8 or level 9 and then sell it and then just like send it and pray, because it's very risky, and also you'll be losing some HP mid game. So make sure that your board is strong as you continue throughout the game, and don't go for the all or nothing unless you really have to. Okay, so that's headliners. We're going to go more into our itemization now of set 10. So I've changed the infographic here. We have a ton of new emblems, some craftable, some non-craftable. It's good to get a general idea of what each icon is. A tip for you, on the carousel, let's say there's a unit carrying an emblem, but you might not know what it is. For example, something like this, right? It took me like my first maybe like 10 games to figure out what this is. This is Dazzler. But what you could do is on the carousel, if a unit is holding an item, all you can or holding an emblem, there's gonna be like an eye above them, and then you just click on the eye, and then you can hover over like the emblem within like the unit profile picture, and then you could check out like what that emblem is. So that's just a quick thing for emblems, and then after a while you'll get used to it. Like you'll be able to figure out what each one is. Okay, so optimizing items in set 10. So headliners, you want to try to itemize them. The reason why is for each headliner, they come with already additional stats. So whether it be HP, if they're like a tank, if they're a physical damage unit, they gain probably extra AD or attack speed. If they're magic damage, they gain AP or some sort of mana. So whatever the case, headliners already have additional stats. So itemizing them, you're just stats are very multiplicative in this game, so giving a unit with already stats, giving them more or different ones will just really boost up your power. So try to itemize your headliner. Second one is more look into a unit's trait or a function and then itemizing around that. So for example, we have 2 examples here. We have Punk and Sentinel. These are just 2 examples. There's plenty of other ones, but this is just something to help you like get the idea of what I'm talking about. So Punk, right? If we read the trait, it gives us HP and attack damage. And remember, I was saying stats in this game are like super multiplicative. So if you already have a lot of attack damage, or you're given a lot of attack damage, you want to invest in like attack speed. You want to invest in amplifiers, something like this, rather than just like purely stacking attack damage and that's it. So because you already have a lot of health and attack damage from Punk, you want to, as I mentioned, benefit the units will benefit a lot more from attack speed or amplifiers rather than just pure extra AD or pure extra health. So for example, like on your Jinx, right? Although Deathblade does have your 8% extra damage, I would say it's better to go for attack speeds like Ginsu's and then amplifiers. So like either like Giant Slayer, maybe get some spreads, so like a Runons or basically anything except for like Deathblade, and she doesn't use Infinity Edge. So that's how you want to think about it, is like if your trait already gives you a specific stat, it's more beneficial to invest in other stats for that unit that already has a specific like stat from their trait, rather than just like purely just stacking attack damage. And then same thing for health, right? All the units gain a lot of health already, so like your frontline units, your Pantheon and your Vi, if you're re-rolling, apart from them just going to be 3 stars, so already having a lot of health, on top of already having health from Punk, the worst thing you could do is just give them just like more health rather than like resistances or like damage reduction. So Warmogs is not the best item on these. It's better to go for your resistance, so like Gargoyles or like Dragon Claw, Steadfast Heart for damage reduction, something like that. So just don't stack stats that are already given to you. And then the other one is Sentinels. This is just an example, right? So Sentinels, you gain armor and magic resist. So these are resistances. Units like these will benefit a lot more from extra health rather than additional resistances. So same thing, don't keep stacking stats that are already given to you. Ideally, try to give, they already have armor and magic resist, so all they're missing is health, right? If you give a unit that already has a lot of armor and magic resist some more armor and magic resist, yeah, it will still help, but they will benefit a lot more from the health. This can be seen in last set, right, with Bastions. The reason why Transfusion Bastion was so broken is, if you played this last set, is because these Bastions already had so much resistances. Getting the health from Transfusion really helped round them out, and it's just a lot more effective HP, and they become a lot tankier. So make sure when you're building your items, you make sure to look at what stats your unit is getting, either from like the unit itself or the trait, and then itemize around that to really like optimize your items. Okay, the second one is I'll talk about the first point here before we get into the new items. So Jewel Gauntlet and IE Infinity Edge, their interaction was changed. Before, if you had like Jewel Lotus or last set and Vanquishers, right, and set 9, Jewel Lotus and Vanquishers, you already had the opportunity to crit, and if you built Jewel Gauntlet Infinity Edge, you're just missing out on that, like on the whole stat, apart from just like the base stats. But now if your unit can already crit and you build a Jewel Gauntlet or Infinity Edge on them, then they just get extra percentage crit damage. So that's pretty good. It's not crit chance, it's actual crit damage, so honestly it's like okay now. So yeah, don't worry about that. And then the value of specific items, some of them increase a lot when paired with another. So if we just look at Titans or like Heartsteel in general, right? Steadfast Heart. Too many hearts in this set. If you look at it just by itself, the item is good. However, if you read it, you want to stay above 50% health to really optimize that 15% less damage taken. So by able to like stack it with more tank items to stay above that 50% HP, you will be taking 7% less damage apart in total, like compared to the regular 8%. So being able to like stack this and pair this with other tank items really increases the effective tankiness of your units. And then something like a Titans, you need to stack with some sort of healing or sustain in order to make it to your 25 stacks, and then your resistances kick in, and then you have your Bloodthirster shield or something to help you stay alive. So when building items, make sure that, when building specific items, such as these two are examples, make sure that you're able to like pair them with others to really get the maximum effectiveness out of their value. And then the two new items I already talked about. Steadfast Heart, sorry. Heartsteel is the trait, too many hearts. And then the other one is Red Buff. So this replaced RFC, or Rapid Fire Cannon. So now the only way to increase the range of your units is from the Ornn item or Ornn artifact Sniper's Focus. So Red Buff, now it deals 5% more damage if you do put it on a unit, 45% attack speed, which is good. And then essentially like Amarello's or a Sunfire, it's a burn and a wound. So burn is just damage, true damage every second of maximum health, and then wounds is reduces healing received. So it's a pretty good item. You want to be putting items like this on units that spread the effect a lot. So units with AoE, right? And then other items that units with AoE, so area of effect, just basically hitting multiple units at a time. Other items like Guard Breaker, super good, so then they have a higher chance of hitting a shield. Also, many units in this set have shields. I think the only ones I can't really think of is like Zac, like Blitzcrank has a shield, Yorick has a shield if you put a Guardian in, Set has a shield, so plenty of units have shields, so Guard Breaker is pretty good. And then Last Whisper as well, being able to apply that Last Whisper, that Sunder, that armor reduction to multiple units at a time is super good on units with AoE compared to single target. So for example, if you think of like Jin, right? Guard Breaker is not great on him because he's just like firing at one unit at a time, and if they don't have a shield, then you're just missing out on some of the effectiveness of Guard Breaker. Okay, so that's the next part of itemization. The last part we'll talk about, so far we just talked about headliners, how to play them early, making sure to upgrade your headliner to a higher tier, so like 3 costs, 4 costs, 5 costs as you go later into the game. We talked about itemization, looking at a unit's traits and just the unit in general, seeing what stats they already have. If you're given like HP and attack damage, then you want to invest in other stats rather than those. So like resistances to pair with the health, or like attack speed to pair with the attack damage. And then finally, we'll move on to unit positioning. Talk about general positioning first. So this is specific to the front line. Remember that the way that the units are programmed, their AI is programmed to attack the closest target to them at the time of the attack. So what does this mean? So since most of the time carries are placed on the corner, because this is the safest areas on the board for ranged units, except for some cases, but generally they're in the corner, they will attack the closest unit to them. So when positioning your front line, you want to make sure that you have your tanks on the outside, I'll explain what outside is, and then your melee damage dealers on the inside or even the second row. So if this is your front line, right, this is, I'll use a different color. Oh, so exciting. This is like considered, it didn't work. Did it work now? Okay, this is considered like the inside, and then like this is considered the outside, because outside is where the units will get hit first by these units in the corner, and then inside is the units that will get hit after the outside dies. So make sure you put your tanks or units that want to be hit on the outside, so either just tanks or like units holding Eternal Winter, something to like soak up the damage and something you want the enemy carries to hit, and then put your damage dealers on the inside of your front line. Doesn't have to be damage dealers, it could just be valuable units or units you want to keep alive, such as units holding Sunfire Cape, units holding Redemption for your outside front line, or even like Spark. You can also second row them, it's perfectly fine, but as long, whoops, oh spoiler, as long as you don't get your units that you want to stay alive hit first, and if they die right away, then you just have your tanks left, and it's not going to work out from there. So remember, that's how general positioning and targeting works. Next one is unit-specific positioning. So I'll talk about Lux, KDA Akali, so not true damage, only KDA specific, and Lucian. These 3 units target the furthest enemy from them. So let's talk about this first example here, right? We're looking at the Lux. This is a classic Lux board, and then let's say you're just playing some mid-game like KDA Big Shot. It's just pretty random. A Lux, she will target the furthest enemy towards her from her in a line. So she's going to ult for this Kai'Sa, like maybe Kai'Sa like dashes a bit, something like this. But generally, she's going to hit the farthest target to her and then everything in between. So what does this mean for Lux against KDA Akali and Lucian? To counter this targeting, you want to put your main carry either in the middle, or like even like I think here is fine, like here is fine. Or you want to same side it and then put a bait unit in the farthest corner. I think middle is safest, because even if you have a bait unit here as well, then Lux might even target this. I think it's pretty close, depends if they move or not. But generally, you want to avoid putting your main carry in the corner against these units, especially Akali, and you'll find a lot more success from there. So keep that in mind. And then the second one is against AoE casters. There's a lot of AoE, so area of effect, units that they attack or they use their abilities and they deal damage in a lot in a 1 hex radius. So remember, 1 hex is, well, just 1 hex, right? So like if we look at this Tom Kinch in the middle, this is what like 1 hex entails, right? So just 1 hex in each direction. So there's a lot of abilities like Senna ult or Senna ult, Seraphine ult, Vex ult, Corki ult that just hits the main target they're currently attacking along with adjacent units, so like 1 hex. So what does this mean? You want to try to spread out your front line and your back line to avoid giving them like maximum effectiveness. So then like, oh, if Senna hits this, right, then she's just hitting like this this radius, so then your other units stay fine. A good example of this is when you have Alawi. That's why you see a lot of Alawi players putting like their tentacles on the outskirts, so then it baits the enemy cornered carry units to hit these. Maybe their AoE doesn't hit that much because it's in the corner, and then Alawi will revive the tentacles as well later, and they still are stuck on the outside. So make sure to keep this in mind when you're playing against area of effect opponents. And then same thing for your backline. If your frontline does die, then at least like when a Senate casts, it only hits like this jinx, something like this, rather than hitting both of them if they are paired up together. Of course, this doesn't work if Senna's the Chosen. Her thing is larger, but in general, try to spread out against AoE. And then against single target, it's okay to clump. The benefit from clumping is they have more concentrated attack. So they're able to like burst like together, like burst down a target easier and then like move on to the next. So there's benefits and cons for each positioning, but in this case, against AoE, you definitely want to spread out. Okay, and that's it. So today we just talked about general tips to help you in set 10. We talked about headliner tips, we talked about itemization, and we talked about positioning. So these are general tips, nothing too like comp specific that will help you in your game. Maybe next week we'll talk about specific compositions in general, but things may change by then. So I just wanted to keep it pretty general and open for today.